All right, I just got the notification on my phone and we are now live for our monthly live Q&A. And today we've got a special guest joining us, Uberman. How are you doing, Uberman?
Pretty good. How you doing, Harry?
All right, and there it goes on my screen, so I'm going to mute it.
Yeah, it's not giving me the option to mute yet, and I've refreshed it twice. There it
Awesome.
goes. Got it. Got it.
Cool.
All
So
right.
it looks like we've got our first few visitors starting to join us. David, welcome to our, I guess this is actually my third YouTube live that we've done and the first time we've ever had a guest. So Randy, I'm excited to have you here and thanks for joining.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So if this is your first time joining our YouTube live sessions, basically how it's going to work is that we're going to go over a few of the top news stories, and there's definitely been a lot that's happened in the past month. We're also going to go over a couple of the latest app updates, and there hasn't been a whole lot going on to the Uber app, but definitely there's one interesting thing that I know Uberman's going to have a lot to say about, and then the bulk of the session is going to be Q&A. So you're going to be able to ask us anything, basically anything from, things that are coming up as far as driving, what it's like in your market, or advice. We're here to basically help and do everything we can to give you guys some live feedback. So looks like we've got quite a few people. I see Uberman, he's in the chat there, and looks like we got Rideshare Genius back. He's a big name. He's always here. Atlanta Excellence and USOKB. Thank you guys all for joining. These YouTube lives are a lot of fun, and we'll be getting more and more people every time we've done it. And this is the monthly series. So hopefully you guys can stay tuned to the end. It's going to be about an hour, and I'm doing a lot of the talking right now, but Uberman is resting his voice, and he's going to take over and hopefully answer all the questions and everything we have going forward. Sound good, Randy?
Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. So I do want to mention one thing. I noticed that Uberman had some nice swag that he's wearing. I got my swag too right here. Got the Rideshare Guy hat, and we're actually going to be giving out 3 hats like we always do, some free swag. So if you guys stay tuned to the end, I'm going to let you know how you can score one of those free hats. We'll do a little quick giveaway and give away some hats to everyone who can make it to the end of the session. So real quick, looks like we got everyone saying hi on the chat. So feel free to let us know where you're from. Give us a hi in the comments. Uberman and I are both in the comments reading, and we'll be trying to respond to as many questions as possible. And I have a quick icebreaker since I was actually just in New York last week. I'm going to ask you guys, just let us know, where would you rather live? If you could pick 2 places, would you rather live in New York or Los Angeles? Because that's actually a decision that I'm sort of facing with my wife as she's interviewing right now for a few different jobs. So Uberman, what do you think?
Oh, man. I'd stay in California, man. Aren't you in California right now?
I'm in California right now, and I think you're right. So, all right.
I wouldn't want to go to New York.
We'll see what the readers and what the viewers have to say about that one. But let's get into it. So every week over on the Rideshare Guy, we do a weekly roundup where we talk about all the top news stories and everything that's going on in the rideshare world. We've got Christian in on the comments, and I'm going to have Christian link to those roundups that we do. But if there's any stories that have stood out to you guys in maybe the past week or the past month, definitely let us know, and we'll try to cover it right now. The first story that I want to bring up that I'd love to get your feedback on, Uberman, is this new, I guess I wouldn't call it a feature, but I guess it's a new requirement where Uber, on the passenger side of the app, actually, they're now tracking your location basically even when you're not using the app. And I know you did a video on this. So what do you have to say? What are your thoughts on sort of that whole privacy issues and Uber kind of tracking passenger behavior?
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, I understand the reasons for doing it, because I know for a fact a lot of drivers out there will drop somebody off, and then especially during a surge, and the surge is already dropped off, they will continue driving and try to make an extra $15, $20, $30 off of the passenger. And a lot of times the passenger is intoxicated. They don't even realize it. So I understand why Uber is doing it, to protect passengers from fraud on the driver's side. But at the same time, understand that passengers appreciate their privacy.
Yeah.
And, some passengers may not want to be tracked where they're going at certain times. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I don't see a problem with it. I don't see why passengers would have too much of a problem. I don't have a problem with it. I use Uber all the time. It's not like they're going to track you and then post it on YouTube and let everybody know where you're going. It's internal. So I don't really see a problem with it. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I will say that obviously there's always that kind of privacy aspect. And especially when it, not just Uber, right? We are obviously single them out right now, but there's lots of big companies that kind of, you're always a little bit hesitant as to what they're doing with your data, right? Why do they need to know what you're doing and where you're going? I think in this respect too, one of the things I read is that one of the reasons on the new Uber passenger app, which, not everyone has, but I think almost everyone has it now, the new Uber passenger app, it'll actually recommend, so it says, where do you want to go? And it recommends where you should go based off your past location. And supposedly, this tracking is there to say, okay, we now see that, hey, if you go and you actually cross the street after you get dropped off, we probably didn't do a good job dropping you off, and we'll incorporate that into the, their smart algorithm. So definitely understand it's a double-edged sword, but at the same time, it seems like we got some comments coming in. Lyft, my door dashing Uber, he says, I don't want to be tracked. And then Robert BA says, Uberman, there are more cases when rider was dropped off, and then he sends a message to Uber, the driver never took him. And then also USOKB says, it's the way the government wants it. That's what it boils down to, control issue. I'm not sure what the government has to do with anything, but hey, it's YouTube, so you never know what you're going to get here, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of conspiracies out there,
Yeah, definitely. So cool. Yeah, so it looks like we're actually up to about 66 live viewers right now, which is awesome. I think we're going to probably set a record. So Uberman, thank you for joining. And looks like we're going to have a very successful YouTube Live today.
Awesome. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. And, one other story that I kind of want to talk about that I think is interesting is that it really directly affects drivers is the story that came out that basically said more Uber executives are driving. And the story specifically mentioned one of the Uber execs her name is Rachel Holt. I think she's general manager of, North American driver operations or something that sounds very important. And that's one thing that I've always found interesting is that not a lot of executives or even people high up at Uber are actually going out and driving and seeing what it's like to be a driver. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts, Uberman, and our audience too. I mean, what do you guys think about the fact that there's actually people at Uber now driving, and they're going to be experiencing the same thing you guys experience, whether it's Uberpool and dealing with all that hassle, or, maybe even, whatever it might be. What do you think, Uberman?
I think it's great to get some of these higher ups out here on the street with everybody else to see what drivers really go through. I mean, that's awesome. I love the idea, but what I'm failing to see is what the end result is supposed to be from this. I mean, I understand that they're really pushing this whole driver improvement program. I'm assuming the only reason they're doing this is because turnover is so high, and maybe they're actually starting to run thin on drivers that are wanting to sign up and start driving. So they need to give something back to the drivers, something back to the community. And to do that, they have to experience it firsthand. But at the same time, they come out and tell you that they fully intend to replace the majority of drivers at some point with autonomous vehicles. So, I mean, what are they trying to do? Just string us along long enough for them to get their cars on the road? And
so we've got a comment right here from Rideshare Genius. He says, I think it's just a PR campaign. I mean, is that sort of what you think too? Or do you think that there's actual, business sense that they're going to start, they want to start empathizing with drivers, and they want to actually genuinely figure out some of these problems so that they can fix it? Because, like you said, they do have problems with driver retention. So it would make sense, right? Hey, if we can't keep these drivers, maybe we should look at making the experience better. I don't know why it took 3 years to figure that out, but it sounds like that's maybe. Do you think it's more PR, or do you think it is actual business purposes?
I think it's probably about 50-50. I mean, sure, they want to look like, hey, we're in it for the drivers and we're out here on the streets with you guys. I'm sure a lot of it is PR. But at the same time, if they keep up at the rate they're going, they won't have any drivers left to compete in this industry. So I think it's also necessary for them to sustain their business model.
Yeah, definitely. No, I feel you on that one. And one thing, I see a couple of funny comments coming in. It says, have them try Uberpool. I think that'll definitely, when we think about that, that might change things. So yeah, interesting. Well, we'll definitely see what happens. I mean, I think that it can't hurt, I guess I would say, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then I just want to talk quickly. Maybe Uberman, I'll give you the floor as far as before we move on from the news stories. Are there any other really important news stories that have happened in the past month that you kind of want to bring up, that you want to bring attention to, maybe people that haven't seen one of your videos or haven't been following that closely?
I've made a lot of videos just this week, so there's quite a few things. But I think there's a couple that stand out to me, and one of them you actually reminded me of just a little while ago was the new feature in the driver app, or sorry, the passenger app, where they want you to leave little smiley faces, little little stickers, if you will, to let the driver know how well he or she did on the trip. And I've had a lot of response to that, because a lot of drivers are really upset about this, because you can take the time to recode your app for smiley faces, but you couldn't put a button for tipping. And they talk all the time about how they really want drivers to be happy. They're really working towards making drivers happy. They're wanting drivers to make a lot more money, to be more profitable. But tipping is too simple, according to an article that I read. That was a quote from an Uber representative that actually the tipping option idea was not the way to do it. That was just too simple. They have to come up with a better way to find more money out here for drivers, other than simply putting a button like Lyft already has to let you tip. There's something else behind that, and it may just be Travis and his pride. I don't know what it is, but he said from day one there would never be a tipping option in the app, and here we are, 2017 almost, and there still isn't one. And they can recode their app for a lot of other ridiculous things. You can't put a button for tipping.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I guess my feedback, my thoughts and kind of my initial reaction to the compliments was sort of similar. I mean, okay, compliments, who cares, right? It doesn't really do a whole lot to your bottom line. And I think that for a lot, it's sort of another one of those things. It definitely isn't a bad thing, right? But it sort of is like, all right, they're devoting resources to this. So I guess in a sense, maybe it is a bad thing, because they're devoting these resources to adding a compliments feature, right? Which they can do this nice big PR campaign around and kind of like let drivers know what they're doing. But it really doesn't have a big impact on drivers' bottom line. And it sounds like, well, I guess I wouldn't say it sounds like, I think it's pretty true that drivers obviously care first and foremost about their bottom line, just like anyone, right? Just like anyone in the industry. And, we've got some interesting feedback coming in right now. Let's see, as far as the compliments, screw the stickers, they don't pay the bills, we need tips. So that's from Estrad1. And Christian says, I think the compliments thing will be effective for Uber retaining new drivers, even though I do think it is a gimmick. And let's see, we've also got a few other comments. But, that's also an interesting thing, because, right, in the past, Uber hasn't given a whole lot of information to say, here's what you're doing poorly or here's what you're doing well. So, I mean, as far as the compliments, do you think that they should just, not worry about that and really just kind of focus on the features that drivers care more about? Or do these little small things like the compliments and, Uber executives driving for Uber, do those small things you think over time are going to add up to a difference? Or is it really more about the big things like adding a tipping, raising rates, things like that?
I think it's really more about the big things. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's nice. I guess I personally don't care if a rider gave me a smiley face or a sad face. It doesn't make a difference to me. What I care about is money. And that's what I'm here for, is to make money. Now, if you want to let me know I did a good job, better than a sticker or a star, give me $2, give me $5, give me $10, And I saw a comment a minute ago that said, well, maybe Uber would be interested in a tipping option if they got a piece of the action. That you can't do that. you can't have the option to tip people and then take a percentage of their tips. That would be a huge problem for Uber. And Lyft doesn't do it that way either. So the little things are okay. I mean, yeah, maybe for some drivers, they're like, oh, look, I got 25 smiley faces this week.
Yeah.
If you want to have a competition with other drivers or something, that's great. But how much money did you make? That's what I'm in it for, is the money.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely what we're all in it for. So it definitely makes sense, And one thing that I think will be a good pitch that I think you might like is, I saw someone recommend in the comments that obviously there is, I don't know that Uber is adding a tip option anytime soon, unfortunately, but at the same time, there are drivers using tip signs. And I know that you've done a lot of videos and you've actually have a couple products too, right? As far as the tip side. So this will be a nice, good opportunity for you to pitch that, I think, and let them know. Because we have some articles too that we've done. We've tested tip signs and we're looking at testing some boxes too. And I mean, frankly, they seem to be working. It's not the smoothest or frictionless, most frictionless experience, but what's your experience and what are your thoughts on tipping signs in general? Because Uber's not adding that option. And like you said, drivers care about their money. So why not take it in your own hands, right?
Well, I've heard the good and the bad when it comes to these tipping signs and things. And the majority of people that contact me and talk to me about them tell me that they've had nothing but a good experience with them. There have been a few. I had one tell me they actually got fired from Uber for a tipping sign, and I was like, okay, can you show me some documentation? Send me something showing me that you got terminated over a tipping sign. They couldn't do it, and I was like, well, I one person out of I can't even count how many of them I've sold. So I would say the majority of people are having a lot of luck with them. And that's good. That's good for drivers. It's good for me, and it's good for the other people that sell products like that as well. So absolutely, I've got them, so I think it works.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like I'm curious to know if our viewers right now have ever tried testing out a tip sign. I know Christian in the comments has done a tip sign, and we have an article on that, and that's worked pretty well. And yeah, it seems like definitely the feedback, no one really cares about the compliments or the badges. I think it's more about the monetary incentives, which obviously makes a lot of sense. So that's interesting. I think that we've got some good feedback coming in right now in the comments. It even looks like we've got our first international viewer too, Stuart from England. So Stuart, thanks for joining all the way from England. We're going to start transitioning now towards more of the Q&A session. So if you guys want to ask any questions, we'll go through and try to answer as much as we can. So starting from that, like I mentioned, with these sessions, we like to talk about some top news, what's going on, some of the latest app updates, and then we'll break into the Q&A. So this is the Q&A portion, and then make sure you stay tuned in the end too. We'll be giving out a little free Rideshare Guys swag. So looks like the first question I'm gonna say is from Stuart, our England viewer. He says, hey, do you guys still have Uber incentives? Uber England took them away after 3 months. So Uberman, I mean, what are, and the incentives are interesting because they do vary. I mean, in LA and San Francisco, there's tons of earnings boosts, right, where they're incentivizing you to drive specific times and places, and then you get extra money. I mean, what are your thoughts on the whole incentives and, kind of like what Uber is doing with that? What have you found? I mean, is Uber offering them to a lot of your viewers, or what are your viewers saying about the incentives?
Yeah, a lot of people are still getting incentives in their markets, and in fact, we still get them here in Oklahoma City, particularly during game nights when we have like a basketball game or we have a major football game or something like that. They'll offer you it's $22 to $25 an hour, depending on what time they want you out there driving. And it sounds good. And I used to be all about the incentives, but to be quite honest with you, what I have noticed from talking to other drivers and being out there myself is when they push these incentives, you get a massive influx of drivers that usually would not even be in that area at that time. And it makes it exceptionally difficult. And in a lot of cases, more cases than not, in my experience, it becomes an impossible task to actually meet the minimum requirements to get that incentive. Last weekend, we had a game in Norman, and I was going to drive it, but I was following several different Facebook groups that are local, and I was watching the amount of drivers saying that they're all going to be in Norman. And I tried to warn everybody, I tried to tell them, listen, all of you guys posting this publicly in these forums, because not everybody gets the incentive. They send it out to a certain number of people in an email, and you can't get the incentive if you were not emailed about it to begin with. So I tried telling people, if you didn't even get the email, you're not part of this program. You're not going to benefit from it at all, but nobody listens to me. I stayed home. And I watched the comments start flooding the forums. There's no money. I'm not making a dime out here. I'm going home.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. I mean, we actually have a good article that we wrote about it that I'll share in the comments right now. Hopefully that'll work. Actually, it might not be clickable, but basically, kind of what we were finding is something similar, right? The first thing, you have to make sure that you're eligible for these guarantees, right? You have to make sure that you're either opting in or that you're getting that direct email. And then the second thing is Uber doesn't always necessarily care about the fact that they're going to send this guarantee to everyone, right? So if there are certain requirements like 2 rides per hour, you have to make sure that that's going going to be feasible. I mean, a 1 ride per hour is most likely going to be feasible. 2 rides per hour, or even 1.5 per hour when there's a ton of drivers out going for a $30 an hour, or, you know, some type of big incentive. That's when you really have to watch out. So definitely good advice there. And it looks like, so we've got some other questions coming in. Let's see, we've got anything else on incentives? I think that's about it on incentives. But we've got a question from Anna. So this is a good question. It looks like from a new driver. I'm thinking about Ubering, but my concern is driver coverage in the event of an accident. Would my insurance company drop me and not cover any incidents? And so that's definitely a big concern I hear from new drivers as far as insurance. And, you know, basically the long and short of it is that you are covered from Uber during periods 2 and 3, which is when you're en route or on a trip with a passenger. They provide commercial insurance, $1 million liability, and collision coverage with a $1,000 deductible. But during that time where you're waiting for a request, which they call period 1, you actually don't have coverage. You have much lower liability coverage from Uber, and you don't have any collision coverage. And that's sort of where this gap exists, and that's where a lot of personal insurers won't cover you. So that's definitely something that you want to watch out for. We have a list of rideshare insurance options. Uberman, what have you heard as far as the whole rideshare insurance from your viewers?
Well, you know, rideshare insurance is still something that's relatively new, and it's not available everywhere. That's the part that's really sad.
Yeah, good point.
You know, Uber and Lyft have been around for quite. I think Uber was founded in 2009, so I mean, they've been around for a while. I would really think there'd be more options available to people, and you know, in my market, there's I think maybe 2 different companies that are available for rideshare insurance, and you know, it is a real risk for drivers if you're out there driving and you get in an accident in period 1 and you don't have any kind of coverage for that gap. What are you going to do? I mean, sure, you could report it to your insurance company, and God forbid if you're at fault and you lie to your insurance company and they find out, because that's insurance fraud, it's a felony, or, you know, you tell them you drive for hire and then they drop you and they deny the claim anyway. So that it is definitely a real concern. You really need to make sure that you are appropriately covered before you start driving.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like we've got a couple recommendations. So I just shared a link in the comments to our insurance marketplace where we actually have basically laid out by state, and we actually just updated this the other day. So the information should all be good, and it'll tell you exactly which options are available. So whether it's Farmers, Allstate, or whoever, and then we'll also have a few recommended agents that we work with that we know are good for rideshare insurance, basically. And we've had a lot of good feedback on that, because you're right. It is, first of all, you have to sort of understand it, and then you also have to figure out if you have something available in your state. And you're right, unfortunately, some states don't have any or limited options. So at least the important thing is, right, that you understand that risk, because, you know, that's the one thing I try to tell people over and over is that you're running your own business right now. You have to look out for yourself, right? You can't really, you shouldn't even, you know, honestly, like take my word or Uberman's word. You want to go and, you know, if we tell you there's $1 million of liability, you probably want to verify that with Uber. You can look at the insurance policy and, you know, it might take you 5 minutes to figure it out, but you'll see that it says $1 million of liability or whatever the problem might be. So that's definitely, I'd say, just general advice. So we've got a lot of good comments flowing, and definitely keep the questions coming. I'm just getting warmed up. What about you, Uberman?
Yeah, I'm ready.
You're born ready. You got the great backdrop, though. I think I need to have a better backdrop for the next time we go live. Because what kind of fish do you have back there?
African cichlids. Well, actually, I've got African cichlids, South American cichlids. I've got cichlids that don't belong together, and I threw them in a tank to see what would happen.
Cool, cool. So I've seen a couple people asking about Uberpool. So this should be a fun topic for us to discuss. And I think the reason we have a few LA drivers and actually some interesting news. I don't know if you know this, Uberman, but Uberpool is now live at LAX, right? So obviously Uberpool has been live all over LA, and it might be, you know, 20 to 30%, or maybe more, 20 to 40% of the requests that you get while you're out driving. And now it's live at LAX. So I've already seen questions from drivers like, hey, I have a Prius C. How do I fit, you know, multiple pieces of luggage at the airport, right? Just a lot of potential, you know, small cars, right? How are they going to fit all that luggage? And I think just a lot of people that don't want to do those rides. What are your thoughts on Uberpool kind of coming to airports and LAX specifically?
Well, luckily, it's not in my market.
Yeah. So you are a lucky one then.
Luckily, you don't have to worry about your acceptance rating anymore.
That's a good point.
Honestly, I wouldn't do Uberpool. I have heard, I mean, granted, when people have a complaint, you'll hear about that a whole lot more than you'll hear people leave positive comments on things. That's just the nature of the beast. But drivers genuinely seem to hate Uberpool. And after some of the stories I've heard, I completely understand. If Pool ever comes to my market, I will not do it. I don't care if it's at the airport, if it's just around my city. I'm not doing it. I'm not accepting that request. No, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that you brought up a really good point that with Uber, according to their official driver deactivation policy, which I can probably link to if I can find it really quickly right now. But basically, their new deactivation policy says that you cannot be deactivated for a low acceptance rate, right? Which you could in the past. So basically what they're saying is you can sit there and ignore as many requests as you want. They may put you in timeout, and there's some workarounds around that. But basically, you do have the option of ignoring those pull requests and, excuse me, and letting basically other drivers get those. So that's definitely one thing that I would probably recommend if you do want to avoid those. But since I do like to provide contrasting opinions, we have a guest post that we posted from one of our contributors over on the site. And I don't know if you've read this one, Uberman, but it's basically from one of our readers who likes doing Uberpool and Lyft line rides. And I think he's definitely in the minority. But if you haven't read that one, if you guys haven't read that one, definitely check it out because he's got some interesting math behind why he likes those rides.
I'm going to open that up and save it for after this because I definitely want to read this one.
Yeah, definitely. And so we did get a question that I think is interesting. Is Uber letting people opt out of Uberpool? And honestly, I've heard a lot of mixed results on this. I've seen screenshots of drivers that have sent it to me and said that, Uber, the community, what do you call them? The customer service reps have said, you're no longer going to get Uberpool trips, but then you go and get Uberpool rides. So I haven't found a good way or reliable way. So I can't reliably say that you can opt, but you can do things like ignoring the requests, or I guess just not picking them up and moving on, or doing Lyft or something like that. What have you found as far as the opting out of Uberpool?
The exact same thing. It's a mixed bag of nuts. Some people swear by it. I've seen screenshots as well. I do believe, and I've experienced something similar when I wanted to opt out of UberX completely and only do Select. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it depends on the representative. So you may get one person that will go ahead and set you up for that, but it seems like at some point your account gets reviewed not too far down the road, and then they switch it back again. And then you go back and forth, and sometimes they won't even do it at all. And if you keep trying, they'll do it again, but then you end up getting reverted back to accepting all requests. So I don't know. I really don't understand how they do it, but it's probably best, instead of wasting a lot of time trying to get it done, just ignore the request. It's a whole lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like we do have, I did see one comment that one driver said he was able to opt out of Uberpool. So if you guys want to give this a shot, I mean, I think I'm more on the same page with you, but there is, Uber is now kind of directing drivers to get help in app, right? So you have to go to the help tab of the app and kind of message them from there for any of the issues that you might have. So definitely interesting. Uberman, you don't have Uberpool in your market yet, so I think you're the lucky one for now, and we'll move on and talk about some other interesting stuff. So let's see. We have we're up to 77 live viewers right now, so that's awesome. And if you guys have any questions, like I mentioned, we're basically gonna keep on going with full Q&A. So honestly, I feel like we could probably deal with some tougher questions. What do you think, Uberman? This is pretty. These are like singles and doubles right now. What do you think?
Yeah. Let's get something a little more complicated that makes us have to actually think about it. Most of these questions, I've got answers on top of my head. Ready to go. Yeah,
I want to see your brain really working over there. I want to see you stumble and get sweaty and nervous. So
yeah, I want to not know.
Yeah, so let's see. We have a couple comments coming in about Pool and Line, but yeah, Lyft Line is obviously very similar. And I did see a couple questions about, a couple readers were asking. So I think someone mentioned something about a referral bonus or referring drivers, which obviously you and I both know a lot about. And then, so if you got whoever asked that question, feel free to ask again. So I remind me.
Rideshare Genius.
It looks like he's got a question for both of us. Have you guys ever received referral bonuses from Uber, which then a few hours later disappear from your account? Happened to me several times. Shady Uber. So I'll let you go ahead and take this one, Uberman. I know you've done a couple of videos about your experience. I know you've had a couple issues, right, with some driver referrals. Maybe you can talk about one or two of them and just sort of, general advice for handling driver referrals with Uber, because, just like with the Uberpool issues, right, they're the same types of issues, kind of like dealing with Uber's customer support, whether you're working on Uberpool issues or whether you're working on driver referrals. And I'm sure that there's a lot you've learned from kind of basically, it's your full-time job, right, to deal with Uber and kind of figure these things out. So maybe you can kind of give us some advice there.
Okay, so I've had a lot of issues with Uber, and I'm not going to get into the specifics on here because it'd take way too long, but my specific experience and my particular problems will not be the problems most people would have. Mine came down to a glitch in the system where I had 2 Uber accounts in 2 states, and it threw their entire system off, and it took a lot of work to get it all straightened out, which they did. But I have very recently, I even did a live stream where I had to go to the Uber office because I was missing money for my referral bonuses. I saw that it was there. I still had the email. I had a screenshot showing that it was going to be deposited in my bank account, and then it just disappeared. Mm-hmm. So this has happened, I think, twice to me now. And if you have a green light, this is the best advice I can give anybody. If you have a green light location, they call it a green light hub. It's basically an in-person help center. These things are spectacular. You can walk in and get your issue resolved right away. You're going to talk to a person that's not been outsourced. You know what I mean? Someone that can actually speak to you, look at you, and work with you to resolve a problem. Definitely go to a green light hub if you have one in your market. Luckily, I do. And what I did is I went in and I showed him the screenshots, and I was like, hey, this money's missing, this money's missing. And he was able to show me, I don't know why, he doesn't know why, but the money was already paid out. Basically, it got paid out the week before, but for some reason it was showing on my next week's payout, and then they took it away because they realized it had already been paid out. And he was able to show me where I actually did get paid for it, because what you can't see on your end is specifically which drivers you got the bonus for. Like after you got the bonus, you can't see who it was anymore. You'll get an email saying such and such, but they have very specific details on their screen, and they can show you that you got paid for this person on this date. It's very specific. And once he showed me that, I was able to see that, yes, I did get paid for it. So definitely talk to a green light hub if you have one. If not, then you're going to have to go through support, and it's probably going to take a while to get it straightened out.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice in general, because, what I've found, just like a lot of other drivers, obviously Uber's customer support is pretty lacking. There's some big problems that they haven't quite solved yet. And, now you have to go in help. You have to go to the help tab of the driver app to get help and figure all that out. But for those complex, they have been able to solve some really easy or simple stuff. But you're right, for anything that's really complex, honestly, the best thing to do is go to one of those Uber green light hubs. And I just left a link for one that I found for Chicago, for example, just so you guys can see. You can go on there onto Uber's website, which they've actually updated now, and they at least have good information there about where the green light hubs are, where the office hours are. And going in person is going to be best for when you kind of can't get those complex situations resolved with Uber, because I know that we have an article on the site about the top 9 ways to contact Uber, and there's all these different methods, but for anything complex, you basically have to go into the office and work with an actual Uber employee. So, so that's definitely a good topic. Let's see. And then, the other question that came in from Steve that I wanted to just touch on briefly is, what is the best strategy to promote your code for additional revenue? Because that's obviously one big thing that you and I do. I mean, one of the main sources of income for the whole blog that allows us, to hire multiple writers and do videos and live streams and all this and kind of work on all this is obviously signing up new drivers. So, do you have any quick tips as far as the best strategy for, the typical driver out there who maybe has a buddy or a friend to sign up and they can both make a little money off of that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're wanting to do a lot of signups, the best thing to do is, number one, stay away from YouTube, because that's my territory. And no, I'm kidding. If you've got subscribers or for whatever channel, that's a great way to promote yourself. But what I found works even better in your local market is the Facebook Marketplace. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it by now. It's starting to overtake Craigslist at this point. I use the Facebook Marketplace more than I use Craigslist anymore. But you can post an ad on Craigslist if you want, along with 1,000 other people on there. Or you can go to the Facebook Marketplace. You can find all kinds of local groups in that marketplace, yard sale sites and things of that nature, where you can promote your code, and you actually can get a lot of sign-up bonuses doing it that way. So I highly recommend using social media.
Yeah, and that's a good tip because I've even seen drivers who sort of take it one step further and they'll post something like, hey, do you want someone to walk you through the process? Because let's say you each are going to get a $200 bonus for getting them signed up and doing 50 rides, right? If you spend an hour with that person, you might make $200, right? So
Yeah.
there's even kind of, obviously a lot of people are going out and maybe just spamming their code. I mean, you probably get a ton on your YouTube channel. I wouldn't be surprised if someone does it in the live chat or hasn't already done it right now. But think about what can you do that other drivers aren't doing, right? Take it to that next step, that next level. If everyone is out there just saying, hey, use my link to sign up, why maybe you offer a free 15-minute consultation, right? Or maybe you offer them a free 30-minute walkthrough. You'll go in person. If you're in a market with big sign-up bonuses, you can probably afford to do 10-minute or 5-minute phone calls. And then as long as you get one out of every 5 people, it'll still pay off. So there's all these different things that, if you're really thinking outside the box, I think you can do. And I know we try to do a lot of that on our respective sites and your YouTube channel. So definitely cool stuff there. We've got a lot of good questions coming in. Thanks to everyone for joining. We'll probably go for another 20 minutes here. Does that sound good for you, Uberman?
Yeah, that works for me.
All right, cool. So let's see. We've got lots of questions coming in. I think I saw a few. Have you guys noticed? Okay. Thoughts on Uber Eats. What is the KFC secret recipe? I'm not sure. Do you know that one, Uberman?
It's cat meat.
Cat meat. All right, we do have a few questions coming in about Juno, and I think we talked about this on the last YouTube live, but it seems like the people want to know about Juno. So when is, the first question that I see probably that comes up most often is when is Juno coming to my city? What are your quick thoughts on Juno? Because I'm sure we could talk a lot about it.
Yeah, I could probably talk for a while on Juno. As far as when it's going to come to each market, that is.
Maybe you could tell us, because I did see one question. It says, what is Juno? So maybe just briefly explain what they are and then your thoughts on them.
Okay, Juno is another rideshare company based out of New York City. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the only market that they're in right now. But from what I've heard from drivers in that market, it's phenomenal. They love it. Passengers love it. Everybody seems to love Juno. Everybody's raving about it. But the problem is it's only in New York City. And I signed up for Juno, and I signed up 260 some people within 24 hours for Juno, which is great. But when are they going to come to my market? I don't know. And to be quite honest with you, it's probably going to take. It was my idea to try to sign up as many people as you can. Sign up with my code, someone else's code, and then promote your code. Network. And the more people you can get signed up for Juno, the more Juno may look at your market and say, you know what, we've got a lot of drivers here ready to go. So maybe we need to start looking into this market. But, I got an email from them saying, we'll be in touch with you within the next few months, something like that, 3 months, few months, whenever we're about to launch in your market. But I don't know if they just say that to everybody, or I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I will say, because I do see a couple comments coming in asking about other smaller rideshare services. And I know we can give a quick shout out because I know there's one out of Tulsa, T-Ride, right?
Yes.
And then there's another that just launched here in Long Beach. I'm just south of LA. There's one called CJ and Go that just launched, and that's sort of a female specific. I don't know if it's female only, but it's kind of like geared towards females, basically. I think you can be a male passenger, but you have to ride with a female or something like that. But there are these other opportunities, and we've covered a lot of delivery stuff on the site because I think that's one that's really interesting. Uber Eats, things like that. But I would say that if you're sort of out there and you're kind of waiting for Juno to come to your market, it might be a while, right? Because we've seen, even Uber and Lyft are kind of slow to expand into a lot of new markets. And if you are waiting for another opportunity, be proactive about it. Go out and see what small companies or what other options are out there. And, it probably is going to take a little work, just like I said. But a lot of times, these companies are offering the biggest bonuses when they first launch, right? They're offering the biggest guarantees when they first launch. So definitely kind of stay aware. What are your thoughts on maybe some of those smaller opportunities that might not be around forever? I mean, do you try to stay on top of those, or do you think they're a good option for drivers?
I think they're a great option for drivers, but I also feel like we're getting a lot of feedback there. I also feel like a lot of drivers don't want to put in the work, and that's where the underlying problem is. Drivers want to just sign up and drive. They don't want to have to go out and network and promote and do the actual legwork to build up a company. Because I guess by nature, people are typically lazy. We don't want to have to do more work than is absolutely necessary to get by. And the problem with that is places like Uber and Lyft, these are ginormous companies that have almost an unlimited supply of money, at least Uber anyway. So, you know, they can pay plenty of people to go out and do the labor work for them. These smaller companies don't have that kind of financial backing, and they are relying on their drivers to go out there and actually help promote them and build them up and do some of the networking and promotional stuff. But, you know, a lot of drivers just don't want to go out there and put in that work. And, you know, then they want to complain because they don't like driving for Uber and Lyft. I mean, if you don't like it, then you're going to have to actually go out there and put in some work and make something, you know, create something, do something different. You can't have it all, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's really solid advice, because kind of just goes back to, right, you guys have to realize you're running your own business right now, whether you realize it or not. And thinking like that, right? Things aren't just going to be handed to you. Things aren't going to be given to you. You sort of have to go out there and take it, right? You have to find these new opportunities. If you're just relying on Uber to kind of pay the bills and do the same thing day in and day out, you might struggle at times. So kind of transitioning to a couple of questions about actually driving. I saw one come in from Keith, and it's sort of a funny one, but I think it's never, I don't think anything like this has ever happened to me. It's definitely something I get emailed about though once in a while. Keith says, I had a passenger leave a bag of marijuana in my vehicle last night. I discovered this after he left me a rider compliment. So we got a 5-star review from this guy, obviously. And it said, we left weed in your car. Can you come back? We will pay you. So kind of a funny situation, but also, you know, there's some potential issues there. What do you think? What would you do in that situation? You saw that comment. You looked in your back seat and saw a little dime bag.
Well, do I answer honestly or? Okay, look, I would honestly probably toss it out the window, and that's a horrible thing to do. Like, that's a horrible thing to do, because what if some little kid finds it? But I'm sorry, I'm not going to jail for anybody. Definitely not driving for Uber or Lyft. So if I look back there and I see drugs in my car, they're going out the window, or in a storm drain, something. They're not staying in my car.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that, you know, it's kind of a funny situation, but obviously these things do happen, right? And I mean, if you drive enough, you're going to encounter sort of, you know, whether it's obviously everyone's had the drunk passengers, but these kind of random situations, just thinking about it logically, like, right, what would happen if you got pulled over, right? Would a police officer, you know, how would it look to a police officer? You get pulled over and they shine a flashlight and you have a little bag of weed sitting in there and you say, oh, it was my Uber passenger. Yeah, right, buddy, that's yours. Come on now, right? So, I mean, it's just thinking about it with common sense, right? And I mean, that's sort of, you know, what I tell drivers is generally try and apply common sense to a lot of these really random situations. And I guess I would say Christian brought up a good point. In California, it's actually legal. So I think in California, hopefully I'll probably have to give a disclaimer, but I think in California, since it's legal, you can keep it and stash it in the glove compartment.
This is not legal advice by any means, so don't come back on him if something goes wrong. Yeah, well, you know, Oklahoma's far behind the rest of the country, and California is just ahead of the curve here. So yeah, in Oklahoma, that wouldn't be okay.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, one other thing that I say as far as on the drug side, because, you know, obviously a lot of you know, Friday and Saturday nights are the busiest times to ride with Uber for a reason, right? Everyone's out drinking, everyone's out having a good time, and they want to have that safe ride. And in the same vein, a lot of drivers, and, you know, this has happened to me too, basically been taken on, I call them drug runs. And, you know, it's not to like, they're not bad in that way, but it's just, hey, you pick up some guy who looks stoned, you go drop him off, he says, I'll be right back in 2 minutes, and then he comes back, and you kind of know what went down. I mean, do you see any issues with that? How would you handle that type of situation?
You know, I've handled that situation many times, and I just drive. Yeah. You know, I keep my mouth shut unless they're, I mean, I'll talk if they want to talk, but if they're quiet and sketchy, then I just leave them alone. My job is to get them from one place to another. I can suspect and speculate all day long as to what they're doing, but at the end of the day, it's not even my business. You know, if we get pulled over, I'm an Uber driver. I can show that I'm on an Uber ride or a Lyft ride or whatever the case may be, but it's not my business what they're doing. So I just keep my mouth shut and I just go with it.
Yeah, I think I actually really like that advice. I've never thought about that before, but I think you're right. I mean, because sometimes I think that we can probably interpret a situation. Maybe we think that a drug run is happening, and then you say, "Hey, I know you're buying drugs," and then your passenger's like, "Dude, what are you talking about? I just dropped something off at my," and maybe it's legitimate, right? So I think in that sense, from just being a good human and a good person, you should sort of assume the best and not try, to make stereotypes and think poorly of others. And I did see a comment come in that I liked. Operation Jackhammer says, first of all, sweet screen name, Operation Jackhammer, and he says, "Stoned passengers better than drunk passengers any day, LOL." And I think that I'd have to agree with that. What do you think?
I absolutely agree with that. I deal with drunks all the time, and I'll take a stone passenger any day of the week over a drunk.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, cool. We can kind of transition away from all the drug talk for
Yeah.
now, but I think we definitely got a lot of good insight there. So, if you guys, we've got about 10 minutes left in the session. If you guys are just joining right now, don't forget, stay tuned to the end. I'm going to be giving out a little rideshare guy swag. Uberman, I think you've got one of these hats, right, somewhere?
I do. It's probably in this drawer over here where I keep a lot of my cameras and stuff.
All right. How do I look with this hat? I feel like I'm not as comfortable indoors in a hat as you are, but
Well, you don't look right with a hat, and I don't look
I
right
know
without one. So
exactly. I think that's what it is. I look right without a hat, and I don't look right with a hat, and you don't look right without one. So we'll keep
no,
it that way. So if you
I
guys are
my
just
hair
joining,
multiple times, and nobody likes it. So I said I had it shaved, and I just put a hat on.
there you go. Awesome. So if you guys are just joining, this is actually our monthly YouTube live series. Today we've got our special guest Uberman on. So thank you for joining. We've covered a lot of interesting topics so far. We're going to go for about another 10 minutes. Make sure you guys stay tuned to the end. We'll do that little swag giveaway. I've got a fun little mission and task. The first 3 people that get it done will get that. I'll send them a Rideshare Guy hat. And let's see. Do we have any other questions coming in? We can kind of wrap this up shortly. I think we've covered pretty much anything. Uberman, were there any questions you saw that came in that you'd like to answer?
Yeah, I've seen one. It's been repeated over and over, and I don't mind answering it. Someone keeps asking if I got in any trouble for live recording my passengers, and the answer is yes and no. About a year and a half ago, I did get suspended for a while due to publicly posting videos of my trips, and Uber Legal looked into it, and I had already had my attorney look into it, so I knew that I was in the clear, but Uber's legal team had to look into it, and since I'm in a single party consent state, that made it okay for me to do it. There's no expectation of privacy in a car, so on a public road. So it was okay for me to do it, and I stopped doing it at Uber's request. But I recently decided I don't care what Uber wants me to do. I'm going to do it anyway because people like it and it's fun for me. So as far as I can tell, there's not much they can do about it. But if any of you are thinking about live streaming or recording your passengers, you really need to check your local laws, because in some places it is a felony to record people without their consent. So be very, very careful and make sure you understand the law before you do something like that. And understand that you could get terminated. Uber could terminate you for it.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point because as you know, and actually I think both of us are really big proponents of dash cams just in general because they do provide a very, I call them cheap insurance policies, right? You don't know what's going to happen on a ride, whether it's something goes wrong or you get into an accident. There's just so many situations where having footage and potentially having audio can really come in and save the day. And especially if you know that as a driver, you're not doing anything wrong. I'm going to link right now to some reviews we've done of dash cams and some more info on the dash cams. But one thing that I definitely want to add on as far as the dash cams, it is definitely pretty simple to do some Googling and, figure out for your state. Do you need to have a sticker in your car that says you're being recorded? And I think in almost all cases, as long as you have a sticker up there, if you're in a state where they need consent, you'll be okay. But obviously, like you said, this is one area where there are some potential ramifications from Uber. So just make sure that you're going out and following your local rules. And, it should be pretty easy to see what they are. Or, one thing that I would also say is go into a taxi and see what they're doing, right? Because if you see a taxi driver in your city using a dash cam and they have that little sticker, just ask them sort of what they're doing, because that they've probably had their lawyers researching it and figuring it out and kind of go based off that and kind of confirm with what you can find. So yeah, so I mean, I think that the dash cam is definitely good advice. Seems like we can do a couple other questions here uh, before we sign off. And let's see, we've got a question about Turo. I'm not going to ask you anything about Turo because we've actually done a video on Turo, right? So I'll link to that, and people can go check that out if they want to learn more about your experience with Turo. And let's see, we've got some more questions. I want to ask just a couple quick ones about kind of some driving scenarios. So Jose says, if you're sitting on a 3x surge and get a pin to pick up outside the surge, do you go get that surge price? So does that question make sense to you?
Yes, it makes sense to me. If you get a ping or a request outside of the surge zone, even though you're inside of the surge zone at the time, you don't get surge from an area that's not actually surging. So that's a request that I would just let slide right on by.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's what this driver is asking basically is, what would you do? Because you're sitting in that surge hoping for a surge, right? And I think that's the perfect advice. Ignore it, move on to the next one. I like this. I think we're going to go faster. Operation Jackhammer, he says, is it okay to drive out of the state? What have you found with that?
Yes, you can, but I've seen many times where the Uber app will automatically log you out. And I've heard different stories. I've heard 6 hours, 8 hours. More recently, I've heard it's 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also heard that if you submit like a review request, that you can get reimbursed for it. So you can take people out of state. At least that's what I've heard. But I do not have any personal experience with driving someone out of state. So I can't say for sure.
Yep, definitely. And so with Uber, I believe their official policy says that obviously you can't pick up anyone in any other state. But we actually interviewed a guy, Simon, at Rideshare Dashboard, who on Lyft, he gave a ride in 65 different cities. So with Lyft, you can't do it in every city, but you actually can drive out of state with Lyft. You can actually do pickups, do drop-offs in other states, no problem, no questions asked. And I think that was podcast 40 something. I don't know. I'll link to it, but you guys can find that. And with Uber, though, their policy is that you can drop off anywhere. So you could start in California and drop off in Oklahoma, but there is, I think it's a 4-hour limit, and it doesn't always hit though, and that's where it's confusing. So you could be driving, and at the 4-hour mark, you get a notice from Uber that the ride's ending, and sometimes it doesn't happen. So definitely watch out there. But once you're in another state, that's where you can't drive. So these are some good questions. Let's see, what else we got? Is Lyft coming to the UK? I can answer that one pretty quickly. No, I don't think they're expanding internationally anytime soon. Another one says, any news on Uber Ski? Are you familiar with Uber Ski, Uberman?
Yes, yes, I am. Uber Ski is an option for drivers that have a ski rack on their car, obviously in places with snow and mountains. So you get an extra $5 for having a ski rack on your car to assist people that want to go skiing.
Okay, cool. So that's a good one. And then we have another question from Nadir. He says, I need tips on good locations for SUV in LA or OC. And I'm assuming he's asking me this because I live in Los Angeles, unless you know the market.
I do not.
And generally, I get a lot of questions like this that are really market specific. And typically what I say is that it really depends on kind of what you're going for, right? So with this question, he's asking for SUV. So he's probably going for, multiple passengers, looking for maybe like those early morning airport runs. And I guess that in general is a pretty good strategy, kind of the 3 to 6 a.m. airport runs where you're going to be driving longer distances and requests are far and fewer between. But obviously there's going to be no traffic, right? You're going to be one of the only other drivers. And that sort of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Uberman, about just doing the work that others aren't willing to do. Not many people are willing to get up at 3 a.m., but for a while there, and I think even still today, that's sort of like a gold mine for airport runs. And a lot of drivers are always asking me about that. And that's definitely a good tip. But in general, for SUV, obviously you're going to look for places where people are going to be having lots of luggage. Families, obviously that's sort of like the most obvious one, going to the airport. Maybe even hotels around Disneyland, right? We have a lot of theme parks here in LA. It wouldn't make sense to hang out around the convention center, for example, because that's where a lot of solo business passengers are going to be going, and maybe they're taking more Uber Select, Uber Black. But around Disneyland, around Knott's Berry Farm, around Magic Mountain, all the hotels around there, you're probably going to have more likely families, right? People with luggage. So just thinking about it like that. Let's see, what else do we got? We've got a few minutes left, so if you guys have any questions, definitely bring them. This has been a lot of fun. Let's see, what else? You see any questions you want to answer before we take off, Uberman?
Oh, there's a funny one. Do you think that tips will be added to the Uber app soon? Eric Brown, I recognize that name. I know he's been on my YouTube channel as well. So we talked about this earlier. No, I don't think you will ever see a tipping option in the Uber app. Not ever.
All right, interesting. So let's see. We also have an issue. Pop says, I have an issue that I'm unable to get resolved in my area. I'm getting pinged while waiting in the queue zone at the airport. I've been to the green light hub in my area. I don't know if we have quite enough time to answer that one. That's kind of a tough one. But yeah, let's see. I would do a drive out of state. All right, cool. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here since we're just about at the end of the hour. And Uberman, oh, before I forget, I have the swag giveaway. All right, so I think here's what we're going to do. What you guys have to do in order to win this swag, I'm going to put the hat on. So if you guys want to win one of these hats, I'm going to be doing a little giveaway right now. Basically, all you have to do is go ahead and share this video on YouTube. So if you guys are on your phone or if you guys are on your desktop, there's going to be a little share button. Go ahead and click that share button and share it to social media. We're going to be really lenient today. You can share it to Facebook, you can share it to Twitter, Instagram. Well, I guess you can't share a link to Instagram, so that might not work, but share it somewhere and then send me an email, harry@therideshareguy.com with the subject line YouTube Live, and just send me a link to wherever you shared it. And the first 3 people that do that, I'm actually going to give you guys a hat. So hopefully, and I'll mail it to you and take care of all that. So hopefully you guys can go ahead and get that all done. Uberman, any final parting words before we take off?
Hold on, I was reading. God, I feel so bad for the person that's having problems with the airport, and I want to help. Look, for the, I can't read the name, I can't read it from here. I need to scoot up closer. But for the person that's having problems with the airport run, email me at ubermanyoutube@cox.net, and I'll see if I can do something to help you out with that. For the rest of you guys, I appreciate you being here. Harry, thank you for having me here. It's a lot of fun. Look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, definitely. That was a lot of fun. And I think we have a link to Uberman's channel in the show notes of this video. It's already there, so you guys can go ahead. Make sure you subscribe to Uberman's channel because he does a lot more videos than me. He works a lot harder than I do, so he's got lots of great video content. Have you been doing many YouTube Lives lately, or just more scheduled videos?
I need to do more YouTube Lives. I do. My subscribers are really unhappy with me right now, but I've got a lot of transitioning going on here, and things have been really busy. So I've been lucky to be able to post videos lately. But I am going to try to do some live streams of my passengers this weekend, Friday and Saturday night. So we'll see how that goes.
Awesome. So maybe if we're out driving this weekend, we'll when we want to take a break, we'll hop over to your YouTube channel. And it's actually cool. If you guys are a subscriber of my channel or Uberman's channel, you can actually go into the settings and enable notifications. So then that way you get live notifications, or you'll get a notification every time we both release a video. So definitely hop over, check out Uberman's channel. If you guys are watching right now, you're probably already subscribed to my channel, but if you're not, definitely do that. Give this video a little bit of a thumbs up if you guys enjoyed it. I really do want to say thank you to everyone who came on. I think we almost got to triple digits, which is awesome. Every time we've done one of these live streams, we're getting more and more people. Really appreciate everyone coming on. Looks like Stuart, Jose, Keith, Oscar, Jackhammer, Nikki, Operations, Nadir, everyone, right? I can't name off everyone because we had a lot of people, but definitely appreciate it. And if you guys haven't sent me that email, you shared the video and sent me that email yet, definitely go ahead and do that. And I'll be sure to send out some swag to the first 3 people. So Uberman, thanks for joining, and look forward to watching your videos in the future.
Thank you. I look forward to doing this again. And thank you, Christian, for moderating the chat room there.
Yeah, Christian is the man. And we did have a couple of trolls, but I banned them pretty quickly.
All right. Well, take care, guys, and I will see y'all later.